Hello, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And that's a straight up introduction.
Yep, she did it right. We did it quick.
Alright, so before we get into the episode, we want to shout out to some very special patrons. Jessica, Sam and Andrew, and Ethan. Thank you guys so much for being huge supporters of what we do, and we really couldn't be here without you.
Indeed. Thank you all so much. We sincerely appreciate you.
As well as all the other great patrons.
We appreciate everyone. We really do. I'm Adam Diaz. That's Robin Grace. I don't know if we already said that. I always fucking forget. So you get 2 introductions. It's always fun. Nice to do that. We're going to be covering some interesting, fun, perhaps scary.
Mine's not fun.
Good to know. We're going to be covering some topics. Robin, what are you covering this week?
So I'm going to be covering a particular suicide bridge this week. So yeah, It's going to be intense.
Good to know. I'm going to be covering the Hammersmith ghost murder, which is crazy.
Is it actual true crime?
It is ghost story combined with true crime.
Cool.
Which is nuts. So pretty exciting stuff. But before we jump into the topics, I just want to talk about some stuff first. On Saturday, we celebrated the United States Independence Day, which was pretty fun. I had a good time. It's the first time I've gone to the pool all summer long, so that was pretty awesome. I don't know how your guys' 4th was, but we hope it was safe. And I do want to state that I did cover the topic, and I wasn't sure whether or not it was something that would really fit of like just accidents that have happened on the 4th of July. I had some good feedback from it. I am sorry to say that on the 4th of July, there was a Columbus Blue Jacket NHL player named Matisse Kivlenix who was struck in the chest with an errant firework. It happened Sunday night while he was in a hot tub with some friends. They got bombarded by some errant fireworks. He jumped out of the tub. He fell and he hit his head. He was taken to a local hospital where he was pronounced dead from chest trauma from being struck in the chest by the firework.
It was a mortar.
Yeah. So very, very sad stuff. And just another reminder that despite the fact that it is a really joyous day that you can spend with your friends and family, it is a very dangerous day, without a doubt. So very, very sad. Rest in peace. That really fucking sucks. He's 24 years old.
He's just a little baby.
So I was definitely hoping that there would be some cautionary tales in last week's episode. And I think a lot of people came out and said, like, I used to do some crazy stuff too. I don't do any of that stuff anymore. And I think more people are aware nowadays of like PTSD victims and things like that and celebrating in different ways. But yeah, I saw that come across today and I was like, wow, that is super tragic and super sad. So I did want to bring that up. It is not the best news without a doubt, but I did want to say something about it. So another thing that I want to talk about, we're going to be moving our recording of Pasta Time this week to Thursday.
Just this week. Every other day will be a normal Wednesday.
Just this week, we're moving it to Thursday instead of Wednesday.
Yes, it is my aunt's birthday. So
it is indeed.
Celebrate my aunt's birthday on Wednesday, and then we will have our regular scheduled pasta time on Thursday. And hopefully you folks can still join us for that day.
Yeah, 6:30 p.m. on Thursday if you want to watch us record it live. The episode, if you only listen in podcast form, will be out as it always is at 4 a.m. Pacific time. So on Friday. It will be no different. So aside from that, we had a nice long weekend, which is pretty nice.
It was nice to have a weekend where we kind of just lazed around and didn't really do very much.
Friday and Saturday, we were super busy. Friday, we were running around getting stuff ready. I still had to work. I think you still had like homework to do. Then we drove around. We wound up having people over on Saturday. We cleaned. We did all that.
You guys cleaned. I felt like the laziest asshole all weekend.
You, in fairness, were the laziest asshole for Sunday, I would say. Or no. It was Saturday. Saturday, Robin woke up a little bit later than the rest and most of the chores were done. But in the end, it worked out. Then Sunday and even like most of today, we got to chill out. We haven't had like a nice chill out session where we just sat at home and literally did nothing in a while. Yeah. We watched a lot of television.
We did watch a lot of television.
I read like 100 pages of my book. We watched Scream 1. Which Robin had never seen.
Yeah.
We watched Scream 2. We watched Scream 3 and watched them get progressively worse and worse.
We also watched I Know What You Did Last Summer.
We watched I Know What You Did Last Summer. The second one we would have had to rent. So
I know.
we
don't own. I wish we owned a lot of horror movies because a lot of streaming services don't offer the older ones. And I really wanted to watch I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. And though there's another one too.
I will always know.
I will always
Yeah.
know what you did last summer or something like that.
I saw the second one. I don't remember it. I've never seen the third one.
I've never seen I didn't even know the third one existed.
Watching I Know What You Did Last Summer reminded me of my boyhood crush. I'm like, man, I was not crazy.
Jennifer Love Hewitt.
Jennifer Love Hewitt's the hottest chick imaginable. Like, I saw that, I was like, holy shit, this is like Robin with David Tennant.
I just loved seeing all these movies with Buffy in them.
Yeah, that's true. She was in Scary Movie 2, right?
Not Scary Movie. She was in Scream.
I always call it Scary Movie instead.
She was in Scream 2. And
she was in one of the Screams and definitely in I Know What You Did Last Summer.
And yeah, she was definitely in that one. But yeah, I just love her. Sarah Michelle Gellar, love her.
And then after that, we were like, let's bring it down a notch. Let's relax. Let's watch a miniseries. So we watched Chernobyl.
So Adam walked out of the room. He's like, just put on whatever you want to watch.
I was like, put on something that I can read to so I don't have to pay attention to it.
And so I put on Chernobyl, and it's an HBO miniseries, and it is so stinking good.
I know we swear a whole lot less now than we used to on the show, but my review for Chernobyl is holy fuck, that fucking shit was fucked. Because it was horrific.
I don't think Adam's watched documentaries about Chernobyl before. I have.
I know what's happened there. I just haven't watched the in-depth details of it depicted in any way,
I was
shape,
telling
or form
Adam,
until
like,
this.
as we were watching, I was like, this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And he was like, no way. People had to have known. Like,
I never said no way.
No, cause you were like,
Robin's imitations of me always have me saying things I didn't say.
Because people came out to that bridge to watch the fires and stuff like that.
I was just like, why would they do that?
Yeah,
like,
but
this is
and I
so
told them,
dumb.
like, they didn't know. Their government didn't even tell them what was going on.
They told them the roof was on fire. And they decided they're going to watch the roof burn from a bridge.
And so it was just like, I've watched way too many documentaries about Chernobyl and the effects of that radiation afterwards and all that stuff.
There's that big thing in Chernobyl too, like that elephant's foot is what they call it. That's supposed to be like the densest material on planet Earth, and it eats radiation. It's super crazy. I almost had it as a topic as well.
Really?
So, yeah, it's one of the most bizarre things that's ever been discovered, and they're still observing what the hell is happening there.
But if you folks haven't seen Chernobyl, the miniseries on HBO, I highly recommend it just because it is
it's intense.
It's really intense. It's really eye-opening. And it's based off of true events, and I think that's the thing that was most messed up about it is that everything that you see in that is real. The characters, the people in it, what the government does.
There's one character that was created to represent a myriad of other characters, which they tell you about at the end in the prologue, where they let you know what happened.
The epilogue.
Epilogue, excuse me. Yeah.
But yeah, it was very good. I'd put off watching it for a long time. I think I watched like the first 10 minutes of episode 1, and I was like, oh god, this is really intense. And then I just put it on this weekend, and we went through the whole entire 5 episodes or something like that. And I highly recommend it. It's really good if you're into history and science and
drama,
things like that, and drama. Yeah, it's
disgusting, horrible, painful deaths. This is right up your alley.
But it's very, very, very educational. I like those weird educational, like History Channel type weird things. So.
It was one of those things where they definitely did it very well, and I got very excited for when they were announcing numbers. I'm like, here it comes the reading. You ready? Here comes the reading. Because I wanted to know, like, tell me exactly what the measurement was. No, they do it like 4 times in that series.
Well, but at the end, it's messed up because the government says that only 31 people died in Chernobyl or whatever.
I'm talking about the measurement of the radioactive parts. I wasn't going to give away any of the epilogue stuff, so.
Oh, sorry. Whoops. But yeah, Adams always walks into the room sometimes, and I'm watching, like, Hitler's circle of people or whatever. You know, I'm always watching.
Watches a lot of World War II
I
stuff.
watch a lot of weird stuff. And so
I went through my history kick in my late teens, early 20s. So nowadays I'm just into fantasy and stuff. So it was weird, like going back and forth between a scene between like a magic user and the king, and then looking up and being like, holy shit, that guy's skin is melting off of him.
But yeah, so highly recommend that. That was our weekend. Did you want to bring up anything else?
Nope, that would be it. I was going to say, I had a transition, but you talked into something else and the transition disappeared. But you were saying that it was crazy because it was based on true events. And speaking of based on true events,
okay.
I will go ahead and move into my topic. I will say that I sincerely had no idea what I was going to cover this week. Deep down, I wanted to cover a ghost story or a haunted house, but nothing that's on our list. And our list is broken down into 2 columns. One with my name on it, one with Robin's name on it. Robin's is much longer. Nothing in my column was really jumping out at me. It was really bumming me out. There was a few things on Robin's side where I was like, this sounds interesting. I've never heard of this, but I don't know. I've stolen too many from Robin in the past.
I know. He always takes stuff off my side. I'm like, what the hell?
I think she took something from me once, and I was like, all right, like, doors open. I'm taking whatever I want.
But, yeah, I don't know.
I took a topic from her side of the document. Again, I'm sorry. I'm admitting it publicly. This one has a bit of everything. It has some ghosts, it has murder, has sex.
What?
While not explicitly stated. I mean, it takes place over a long period of time, so there had to be people boning. But there's no boning within the script or anything like that. It's just, someone's out there having sex.
You're so stupid.
So anyways, I will be covering the Hammersmith ghost murder. So this story takes place across the pond in the Hammersmith district of West London, England.
Is it the story of a girl?
No. So shout out to our friends over there. We did just celebrate our Independence Day, and we couldn't have done it without you. So,
is that why you're singing Hamilton tonight?
I mean, I was singing Hamilton for a myriad of reasons. I've used that word twice in like 10 minutes now, but it was mainly because I was looking up some other stuff.
Okay.
So
I just know that
it's always in my head.
Okay.
I was also singing different parts of that musical, mainly because King George makes an appearance in my script. Spoiler alert.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
Seriously, though, we love you. To anyone across the pond who listens to us, you folks are amazing. I will be visiting that region in the future, even if I have to leave Robin behind because she only ever wants to go back to Japan.
I'll go to Europe. I want to go to England. That'd be fun.
I want to go to England. I want to go to a lot of different places in Europe as well.
I want to go to Scotland.
So, fingers crossed we can go over there. This is likely to be known better across the pond as versus like in the United States. If you're a true crime buff or a paranormal person,
also known as a ghost,
or a supernatural buff, you might have heard of this. Folks in this region most likely have heard of this story. However, it's not super likely to be like known by all the locals because it did happen over 200 years ago. So the story starts out way back in November of 1803.
Okay.
Y'all remember 1803,
yeah,
right?
It was a great year,
right? Beethoven wrote Symphony No. 3, widely regarded to be the greatest symphony ever written.
Okay.
I read a bunch of lists where like the top 100 conductors in the world vote us for the greatest symphony, and Symphony No. 3 was on the top for several of those lists.
All right.
Ohio became the 17th state. Shout out to Ohio. Robin confuses you with Utah a lot, so you both have 4 letters.
I did it at work last week.
Your states that we don't visit very often. And in 1803, despite only wanting to purchase the port of New Orleans, President Thomas Jefferson completed the Louisiana Purchase with Napoleon. And that's basically, his name? I think it's just Napoleon. But that's like going into Walmart to buy paper towels and they just hand you the keys to the fucking store. Like, you bought the whole place. Like, it completely belongs to you now. Side note, this is very interesting. The reason Napoleon sold that much as opposed to just the port is because he decided to completely abandon the territory in North America because it would be indefensible, and he had a war with England coming up that he knew would need to be his primary focus, and he didn't have a lot of money. And as a side note, the reason he decided this was because they had enslaved the island of Haiti. There was a revolution where the Haitians rose up and overthrew the European masters that had settled there. And then he went back there to re-enslave the island of Haiti. And the people of Haiti said, get fucked. They fought back. They kicked his army's ass. And then while trying to regroup, his army wound up catching yellow fever and started dropping like flies.
Wow.
They abandoned it. They said, we're not going to try and re-enslave Haiti because Napoleon was 100% pro-slavery. And they just decided to abandon all of the United States, in fact, and parts of Canada that they owned. That's why they actually wound up selling the Louisiana Purchase to Thomas Jefferson. And he was like, we want to get Louisiana eventually, but let's get the port now. And they're just like, fuck, take it all. Like, what can you give us for it? They sold it for an astronomically low amount. It's absolutely insane. So if you are a proud resident of the following states: Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, North Texas, Northeast New Mexico, 2/3 of Colorado, including Denver, 4/5 of Wyoming, 5/8 of Montana, half of North Dakota, about 97% of South Dakota, all of Missouri, all of Iowa, 60% of Minnesota, thank the slave uprising of Haiti and England because they indirectly or slightly directly are responsible for your region becoming part of the United States of America.
Interesting.
So I just want to give some shout outs there. And in fact, King George, the guy we told to fuck off, indirectly helped us absorb 1/3 of the country we now call the United States of America.
It's funny because when you were starting to say that it was indefensible and stuff like that, so he's just like, no, I'm good. I was just thinking about when you play Risk and you have that one soldier in the middle of all the other areas.
I had these boned.
You're like, I sacrifice you.
And then if you keep rolling a 6 on that one white dice, you're like, hero soldier! But yeah, Napoleon's like, no, we're just going to sell this stuff. So I just want to give a shout out to that. However, this is 1803. That is the time period we are discussing right now. All those things happened. I will give you some more 1803 facts at the end of this, which will kind of blow your mind. Back on the other side of the pond and not in the United States, something rather interesting was happening in the region of Hammersmith. Several people stated that they had seen and been attacked by a ghost. One individual claimed that as they were going through the churchyard between 8 and 9 p.m., the entity came out from behind a tombstone and grabbed him by the throat with both hands. It held him there as he struggled to gain his freedom from it, and his, quote, fellow servant, also known as manservant or indentured slave, heard him struggling and came back to help him. The ghost then spun the guy he was holding away from him and ran away. So when the guy came to after he hit the ground and looked up, the ghost was completely gone. This happened, and then some other folks came forward and stated that they had also seen or been attacked by a ghost.
I'm just thinking, since this is you said part true crime, right?
Correct.
I'm just thinking it's some guy in a costume, and he's at the end gonna get his, just desserts or something, and he's just gonna be like, I would have gotten away with it too if it were for you meddling kids.
I was really hoping that whoever it wound up being was named Old Man Withers, but it didn't turn out like that.
Damn it. But is it something like that?
Kind of, but not really, but kind of. We'll get to it. So, it wasn't just like the normal, I saw this thing and it gave me a fright, or it scratched me and I felt cold wind. No, this thing came out and started choking someone and held him in place. I haven't found any official counts of other assaults, but I assume that there was one of them that ended when the ghost was choking the individual and the individual said, harder. So, I can only imagine that's the case, though. The ghost.
Why are you telling us all your kings?
The ghost was said to be very tall and dressed in all white, as if in a white sheet. It was also said to appear in a calfskin dress with horns and glass eyes. So 2 different descriptions being given for this entity.
One not so scary, the other one absolutely horrifying.
Yeah. Side note, I'm getting these descriptions from official court documents entered into record on January 11th, 1804. So while this could be bullshit, it is what the folks at the time stated happened and swore was the truth to a court of law. And just in case you are wondering, yes, they do also state that they will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And the intro is a little bit different, but that part is exactly the same in London, England. So this gentleman with the manservant or fellow servant or whatever they called it, had someone attack him. Then an elderly woman and a pregnant lady stated that they had been walking near the churchyard and had an almost identical experience, but managed to struggle rather than getting held up and choked. Those 2 ladies are not confirmed to have actually existed, but according to this ghost story and not the testimony, so not the court documents I found, both women went home and were so scared from the encounter that within several days, they, quote, died of fright.
Wow.
So people around town were very, very scared of this. And even in the court documents, you can see that they're referencing, I heard about something that happened to a lady. I didn't know her, though. And I can't confirm that this was someone that actually existed, because they get asked a lot of questions. So, a wagoneer driving a team of 8 horses states that he saw the ghost on his way to the town and was quite literally terrified by the sight. He lost control of his carriage due to his fear, but managed to get it stopped. And his 16 passengers that were aboard stated that he was shaken beyond reason. He looked pale as a sheet. He looked like he had literally seen a ghost.
Wow.
So this was something that was on the minds of everyone in town. And these sightings and attacks were taking place in November, and it stretched into December. The locals believed the ghost to be that of a man who had committed suicide in the years prior and was buried in the churchyard that the attacks were centered around. So they thought it was an actual ghost attacking people, and they thought they knew whose ghost it was. So at the time, there was no central police force for this particular area. So the townsfolk volunteered to have folks step forward and basically form a neighborhood watch of sorts.
Okay.
To keep an eye out for the ghost and keep additional people from being attacked. I just imagine Sam and Dean Winchester, back in 1803, 1804, with shotguns crammed with rock salt to blow the ghost away if he shows up.
Have you ever watched Neighborhood Watch?
No, I have no idea what that is.
It's a movie with the guy from Zoolander. What's his name?
Ben Stiller?
Ben Stiller and the guy from Wedding Crashers. It's not
Vince Vaughn?
Yeah. It's those two and
Wow.
a couple other guys, and they create their own neighborhood watch.
Isn't Moss from IT Crowd in that too?
I think so, yeah. I think
I remember the
you're probably
commercials for it, come to think of it.
Yeah.
So, but they have a neighborhood
right.
watch.
That's what I imagine.
So that's what Robin's imagining. I'm imagining something different. One such night watchman named William Girdler claims to have seen the ghost on December 29th. Upon seeing it, he shouted for it to stop with a region-specific "Oi!" He then chased after the ghost, and it ran from him, which seems very human to me. It fled into the narrow lanes of the churchyard and removed its shroud, which enabled it to run faster, and eventually it outpaced William, and he did not catch it. After this,
So was a dude in a sheet.
After this, more folks started to think this isn't a ghost, this is a flesh and blood human being, and more volunteers started to step forward to try and catch the ghost or stop the ghost or whatever it might be. Girdler continued his patrols, and 5 days later, on the evening of January 3rd, he would run into another individual patrolling. This individual was intent on simply getting rid of it, whether it be a ghost or a man, and it was a 29-year-old man named Francis Smith. They met on the corner of Beaver Lane, solid name for a road, at 10:30 p.m. on the night of January 3rd. Girdler was carrying a pistol. He had always carried a pistol with him when he was patrolling. Francis was carrying a gun as well. I have only found one source that identifies that gun that Francis was carrying as a shotgun. That is Wikipedia. It did not have a source cited. However, in any of the court documents that I can find or any of the retelling of the stories that I can find, it just has a gun. So it could be a shotgun. That's one reference that I see in Wikipedia. Could be whatever, but it is definitely a gun. It's not a rifle. I'll tell you that.
Really?
It's not a rifle, because they would have mentioned rifle specifically, because they typically say pistol throughout the testimony.
Ah.
So, moving forward. Smith says he's going to go look for the ghost, because he's kind of like the new guy. And Girdler, who's been doing this for a little while and already saw the ghost 5 days earlier, says, "Cool, sounds good. I will join up with you after I call the hour." At 11 o'clock, he was going to shout out to all the citizens, "Hey, it's 11 o'clock." Because apparently that was a thing where you just yell at 11 o'clock at night to let people know it's 11 o'clock at night.
Okay.
So once they joined up, they were going to, quote, "take the ghost if possible." Enter one Thomas Millwood. Thomas was a bricklayer who was visiting his parents at the time. He was a resident of the town. So were his parents. He was at his parents' house. His wife had a prior engagement that she was at, and she wouldn't be heading home for a bit, so he decided he would visit his parents rather than sit around alone. He sat and talked with his sister, Anne. And between 10:30 and 11 during this time, he was speaking to his sister, and their mom was also there, but she became sleepy and went to bed. He and his sister spoke with each other until they heard the hour called. They distinctly remember hearing someone say, like, "Hey, it's 11 o'clock, fuckers," or whatever they say when it's 11 o'clock. He stayed there for a little while, but eventually Anne told him, due to the late hour, he should probably head home so his wife doesn't have to arrive home, or she doesn't have to walk home alone. I'm not clear on that part of her testimony. That said, he says, "Oh, you're right." He says goodbye to his mom, and then he heads out.
Is the testimony, is it in like older English language?
Little bit.
So you're like hard to kind of translate what
a little
they're trying
bit.
to
There's
say?
certain verses that they say where it's like, I understand what they're saying there. No one speaks like this anymore.
Okay.
But when it comes to like her saying like she shouldn't walk home alone or she shouldn't arrive home alone, it's a little bit iffy because she starts talking about what's eventually going to happen.
Oh God.
So that night when he was speaking to his sister, he actually didn't speak on this particular matter I'm about to tell you about. But a few nights prior, Thomas's wife had brought something up to him that concerned her. So back then, a bricklayer, which was Thomas's profession, had an outfit that was all white. And it concerned his wife that he would be working and walking home during evening shifts wearing all white when there was such a panic going on about this ghost plaguing the town. And in fact, on New Year's Eve, that Saturday, when she brought this up to him, there had been an incident. And I'd also like to point out now that I'm tossing out dates like December 28th, December 29th, New Year's Eve, January 3rd. Don't even think about it that way, okay? Girdler, on December 29th, when he saw the ghost, that was Thursday. This event that's about to take place happens 2 days later on Saturday. That makes it seem a lot closer together, you know?
Yeah. Dates make it a little confusing. When you say just like, this happened 2 days later.
Thursday, sees a ghost. Girdler sees a ghost. Saturday, Thomas, bricklayer, is walking home. And while walking home, a man and two women are passing by him on a carriage, and they become frightened. The man on the carriage calls out that he's seeing the ghost. What he's seeing is Thomas in his bricklayer clothes. Thomas replies to him and states that he is no more a ghost than the man on the carriage is. And according to Thomas's wife's testimony, there was a bit of an exchange between Thomas and the man on the carriage, and Thomas asked him, quote, using a bad word, did he want a punch of the head? So basically, some dude is driving by and is like, is that the ghost? And Thomas responds with, are you a ghost? No? Then I'm not a ghost. And the guy says something shitty, and Thomas replies, how about I punch you in the fucking head? And then the guy and his two lady companions fuck off in their carriage and they just leave.
I like that you didn't even use like any accent
didn't even try.
for that.
Wasn't even gonna try for it. I already did oi. It's close enough. So Thomas's wife hears this story after expressing to him her concern and begs him to wear different color clothes to work. But Thomas says no, he's not going to do it. This is his work outfit. This is what he's going to fucking wear. He hopes the ghost gets caught. He thinks the ghost is a human being, probably, maybe an asshole. He mutters under his breath. She's not exactly sure what he says, but in the end, he says he's not going to change his clothing. You snap back to January 3rd. He just said bye to his mom, bye to his sister. He's stepping out into the night. It's just past 11 o'clock. It's Tuesday, or as they say across the pond, Tuesday. And Thomas steps into the street wearing all white. And Thomas's sister states that almost immediately after he left, she got up and went to the door because she was nervous, and she heard someone shouting, quote, damn you, who are you, and what are you? Damn you, I will shoot you. She hears two voices speaking directly after that, and in the midst of their speaking, she hears a gunshot.
Oh, no.
So she opens the door, steps out, and starts calling her brother's name, Thomas, as loud as she can 3 or 4 times, but no one says anything back to her, and she fears the worst. She goes back inside and goes into her mom's room and yells, Thomas has been shot, and then runs out. She says she didn't even wait to see if her mom woke up or not and ran upstairs to her dad's room. So she's able to wake her dad up and tells him, my brother's been shot, and her dad basically says, like, you're an idiot, I don't believe you. So she runs out of the room. She runs to another young man's room. It doesn't say who it is. It could be a cousin, another brother. Could just be someone staying in the house. She wakes that dude up. She says, my brother's been shot. He also tells her, I don't believe you.
What a business.
So she's like, my brother's been shot. I'm sure of it, and no one's helping. So then she runs to the window on the second floor, opens it, and starts screaming his name as loud as she can. And again, no one responds to her. So at this point, she says, fuck it. She's going to go check herself. And this is 1804. These guys are supposed to protect people, you know? Mm-hmm. They have this idea in their head of chivalry. Women are stupid. They need to be protected. And then this chick says, hey, my brother's been shot. Your son has been shot. And the guy's like, whatever, I'm going back to sleep. So she runs out into the night, and halfway between her father's house and Thomas's house, she finds Thomas laying in the street. He had been shot in the face. The skin
in the face?
Around his left side of his jaw had been scorched black, and his face was just decimated from the blast.
It must have been like super close range.
His jaw had been shattered, and the bullet had actually traveled through his jaw into his neck and struck his spinal cord and ruptured it. She ran to him and gathered his hand in hers, calling his name and hoping he would speak to her, and he was dead. He had been dead as soon as he was shot. There was no one else there. Smith had shot him and ran to go find Girdler. When he found Girdler, he told him, I just shot someone. I think I hurt him. He's not saying I shot the ghost. He's saying I shot a man and I hurt him. So Girdler says, I hope he's not that hurt. Let's go back there. So they go back to the scene. Eventually medical assistance arrives. They get there and they're like, this dude is dead. And Smith is arrested. I think while they're investigating what happened, it takes about 2 days. They go to Smith's house. They're like, hey, we're arresting you. He comes along peacefully.
He knew what he did.
He knew what he did.
He shot that guy. Yeah, it's like, come on.
It doesn't take long for the trial to begin. This happened on the night of January 3rd. So the morning of January 4th is when like all this shit would be going down. January 11th, 7 days later, after like people woke up to find this person dead, the trial begins. During the trial, there was a lot of testimony regarding the character of Francis Smith. I was able to find a transcript of all the questions asked from both sides to all of the witnesses except for the character witnesses.
Nice.
The character witnesses just go up, make a statement for the defendant, say this is what he's like, and that's it. 12 character witnesses were presented by the defense, all stating that Francis was a good and kind person. Girdler testified, and he had to answer specific questions about what happened that night. He was asked, were you carrying a gun? Was he carrying a gun? He says, of course, I always carry a pistol with me. Yes, he was carrying one. And eventually he is also asked, what kind of a man was Francis Smith before the shooting? And he also states that he was decent and good. Says, like, this is a good guy. But one thing was very clear. At the end of the testimony of the trial, once the defense and the prosecution had both rested, Francis Smith had shot Thomas Millwood in the face and killed him. There was no disputing that. And he was out because he was looking for a ghost.
It's kind of crazy because you're like, you run into this person and he's a real person, but he's wearing all white, so you just immediately think he's a ghost, and so you just shoot them in the face.
The motivation here was fear. He was afraid and he had a gun in his hand, which is like the two factors that you can combine to equal the dumbest and most dangerous creature on the planet fucking Earth. So that's the state of this right now. Another thing that becomes apparent is that the two men spoke briefly. So he was being spoken to by this person, by Thomas, before he shot him in the face. And he seemed remorseful over what happened. And he did immediately try and get assistance, but nonetheless, he was responsible. The jury is sent out to deliberate what had happened and was expected to return with a verdict of either guilty or not guilty for the charge of willful murder. The jury takes 45 minutes and comes back and pronounces Francis Smith guilty of manslaughter, which is a completely different charge. The judge hears that and then admonishes the jury and explains in basic English, you can't fucking do that. Like, this can't be manslaughter. The verdict literally cannot be accepted. And he then on the spot tells them that they must decide, is he guilty or not guilty of willful murder? No reduced charge. That is the charge. Willful murder. They can either state that the witnesses in the trial did or did not give credit to the prosecution and find him not guilty if they think they didn't give credit to the prosecution. Otherwise, they have to find him guilty. And the jury immediately announces on the spot, he is guilty of willful murder.
Yeah, I mean, he shot someone. You can't get out of shooting anyone, even if you think he was a ghost.
So he is sentenced to death by hanging and dissection. Like, dissection, the thing you did to the rats or the frog in 7th grade. Yeah. It's also called dismemberment when it's a punishment in human beings. He's going to be hung and then he's going to be basically pulled apart. So after that, the same judge that admonished the jury, who is the highest judge residing over this trial, states that he's going to take this case and present it to King George III. Yes, that King George, the one we fought in the Revolution.
Okay.
That's why I was singing the King George songs earlier. After reviewing the case, the sentence was commuted. So King George reviews this case and says, so this guy thought he was acting in self-defense. He was acting out of fear and he thought a crime was being committed and this happened. And the sentence is commuted from death by hanging and dissection to 1 year's hard labor.
What?
So basically, what a bunch of people do nowadays for work was a punishment that you could be sentenced to back in 1804.
Which is funny because that's what happened in Chernobyl too. The guys that were in charge that made bad decisions.
Was it 10 years?
They were sentenced to like
one of them
8 or 10 years of hard labor.
And once they were done, spoiler alert, they got to go back and work at more nuclear power plants.
Which is nuts to me.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So this guy basically is told, like, we're going to hang you. You're going to die. We're going to tear apart your body. The judge says, also, I'm going to go check this out with the king because this one's very interesting. The king reviews it, states, all right, he needs to be punished, but he shouldn't be killed. He reduces his sentence to 1 year of working hard, which he already was as a fucking bricklayer.
What? Okay. As Thomas's wife, imagine being in her position and you're just like, really? This guy murdered my husband and you're just going to let it go?
Right?
How? Why? No.
So the whole thing was such a tragic mess that an elderly man named John Graham, who was a shoemaker in town, came forward and admitted to pretending to be a ghost.
What a dick. Ugh.
He was putting a white sheet over himself specifically to scare his apprentice because his apprentice had been scaring John's children with, you guessed it, ghost stories. So he decided he was going to be a ghost and scare the shit out of his apprentice instead.
Dang it, dude.
Which is weird because people were saying they were being choked by this ghost. And the ghost was supposed to be tall and clearly very strong. And it stated that John Graham was an elderly man. So coincidentally, though, I cannot find any punishment whatsoever being given to John Graham after he admitted he was the ghost, which kind of fits with something that was said during the trial. So the defense tried to argue that Francis had shot because he believed Thomas Millwood was guilty of committing a crime of pretending to be a ghost, not just he thought he was a ghost, so he shot him. He thought he saw this crime being committed. This guy was dressed in all white. He was basically serving out justice when it wasn't his place, but it wasn't murder because there was a crime being committed. The problem with that...
I'm sorry, but pretending to be a ghost does not deserve being shot in the face.
Here's the thing about crime and justice and law and all that stuff. You don't just get to fucking kill someone because you decided they committed a crime.
A vigilante.
There are certain things that an organized society decides is guilty of the death penalty. You're not fucking Judge Dredd. You don't get to take a gun and shoot someone because they're doing something you don't like. That's just not how it works. Didn't work like that then. Doesn't work like that now.
What if you're Green Arrow?
I hate you so much, and I'm going to keep going. So, when they tried to argue that, the same judge had pointed out that frightening people while pretending to be a ghost was not even a felony. It would at best be considered a misdemeanor, and the largest penalty that could have been given to whoever was doing this was a small fine. That is it. They had no reason to shoot him in the face and kill him, and the defense immediately stopped trying to argue that point. He was just like, let me just shut you the fuck up really quick. Stop saying that. I don't want to hear it, and here's why. And then after that, they never brought it up again. The lasting impact...
I'm trying to imagine that conversation in Old English.
It might have sounded different. I guarantee you it had the same sassy hand gestures that I just exhibited. So the lasting impact of this case was so substantial that it was debated whether or not acting in self-defense on a mistaken belief could or should hold up in court. And that was debated for over 200 years officially. This came back up in 1984, a year before I was born, when a man saw a crime being committed. He saw one man dragging another one down the street violently. And the man being dragged was begging for someone to help him. So he ran over and he beat the shit out of the dude who was assaulting the guy on the ground. Turns out the guy on the ground was a fucking thief that had just been chased down and was grabbed to be arrested. And he went over there and beat the shit out of the guy who had a crime committed against him while he was trying to detain him. He wound up being convicted of assault causing actual bodily harm.
Wow.
He was a bystander trying to do the right thing, but was wrong in what he did. So he winds up getting convicted, and then his attorney appeals and uses the Hammersmith ghost murder from 1804 as a precedent for what had taken place, and this guy's conviction gets thrown out in 1984.
Wow.
The judge who throws out the conviction during the appeal states, quote, this is kind of a long thing, but I shortened it and I took a piece out of it. So it says, quote, if the jury comes to the conclusion that the defendant believed or may have believed that he was being attacked or that a crime was being committed and that force was necessary to protect himself or prevent the crime, then the prosecution would not have proved their case, end quote. Meaning the prosecution failed. This person is innocent. They didn't do anything wrong because they didn't know. Basically, ignorance is an excuse if you are acting reasonably to prevent a crime from being committed. So they say specifically force was necessary because you thought this crime was being committed and you were trying to prevent it.
So you're allowed to beat somebody up?
He's trying to stop this from happening, basically.
But couldn't he have been like, hey, what are you doing?
I'm sure something like that did occur, and eventually the scuffle happened, and he just got the better of the other person. He didn't go over there and just beat this guy brutally to death. Otherwise, he would not have been found.
If I were the guy dragging that other guy, right, I'd be like, he just stole from my house.
There was probably like no communication between the two of them. It was probably like, fuck off! And then he tackled him or something like that. Or he tackled him and then they fought. So this gets repeated 4 years later in 1988 on a different case. And again, it holds up. The Hammersmith ghost murder precedent holds up as basically ignorance is okay as long as you're trying to do the right thing. And then on May 8th, 2008, it is finally written into law under around the same words where if you don't really understand what's happening, but you're trying to prevent a crime and force is necessary, you can be acquitted based off of that.
That's messed up.
Goes into law May 8th, 2008. So to put that into perspective, the story I told you took place in 1803, November 1803 when it started. The American Revolutionary War had only been over for just over 20 years. 20 years. When the debate over what happened in 1803 finally ended, Barack Obama was president.
That's nuts.
That's how long it took them to decide. That's how long people argue, like, well, you're still fucking committing a crime, even if you think you're doing a good thing. And it went back and forth for that long, 205 years, before finally they wrote it into law and said, in this specific instance, if you can prove they thought they were doing the right thing and that force was necessary to prevent the crime from being committed, then it is okay, basically. So this whole thing is absolutely crazy. And in the end, there was no ghost. It was just an old man trying to scare some asshole who had been scaring his kids. And that, my spooky friends, is the story of the Hammersmith ghost murder.
That's messed up. It's really messed up. And that's why I put it on my list. I was like, it's really interesting. I just thought it was really cool how you presented it and actually brought up like all the different cases and stuff like that. It was really good. It's
a really hard thing to debate. You know, it's like if you decide you're going to step in and try and prevent someone from being hurt, prevent a crime from being committed, and it turns out you're wrong, there's something in place to protect you from going to jail for the crime that you were basically trying to prevent. In this particular case, shooting someone in the face isn't exactly trying to prevent someone from being haunted.
Not at all.
It is an absolute overreaction.
Yeah.
He still got penalized, whereas later on in 84 and 88, those convictions are just basically thrown out as like
they
thought they were trying to do something good. But in the end, like sometimes shit happens, and by getting involved in the wrong way without trying to find context or information, you can be in the wrong. You can unknowingly aid a criminal, or you can unknowingly shoot an innocent person in the face.
Do you think that's why, in this day and age, people don't really involve themselves with other people's business anymore?
There is a lot of people I know growing up who always told me, like, no matter what you see happening, you don't know what's actually going on, mind your own fucking business. Like, you could see two guys fighting with another guy and think that's not fair, 2 versus 1, and that one guy could be a serial killer or a rapist, and the two guys could be plainclothes cops. Like, you never know what's happening. And the hard thing is if you are a good person that feels compelled to step in and do what you think is right, having absolutely no information, it means you're basically rolling the dice and hoping that you're not helping someone inadvertently that shouldn't be helped, or making things significantly worse. What is known is if you have a gun and you're afraid, you probably shouldn't just shoot someone in the fucking face based off those two factors. Like, and if you think you should, you have no business owning a gun. But that is my take on this whole thing.
Well, I mean, shouldn't people shoot to, what is it called? Immobilize and not necessarily murder someone?
Oh, you don't think shooting someone in the face for wearing white is appropriate?
No, I mean,
technically it was after Labor Day, Robin, so it does seem like it was a crime.
Get out of here. Shut up. I hate you. Anyway, thank you for that topic, you asshat.
You're welcome. We could debate this all night. That's why I'm like, it's just, obviously, I would prefer if you're going to shoot someone who doesn't have a weapon to shoot them in the foot, but this guy was just riddled with fear. Maybe at the time he did think it was a ghost and didn't want to admit it, but in either case, fascinating topic. Thank you for letting me steal it.
You're welcome.
All right, so before we move on to Robin's topic, we are going to take a quick commercial break.
All right, welcome to my depressing half of the episode. So this week I'm going to be covering something that may be triggering to some or even many because it does pertain to suicide. So if you don't want to hear any of these details, you might want to skip this topic. Because this week I am going to be covering a suicide bridge, quote unquote suicide bridge. So this topic kind of stems off of our special guest episode with the JJ Obsession. They brought up this bridge that has been locally known as Suicide Bridge. It's been a site of a few films and TV series, including Full House, Fear Factor. It was even in a Charlie Chaplin movie called The Kid. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I've heard of The Kid. I've never seen it.
The bridge was also used in the music video for Lana Del Rey's Summertime Sadness.
Are you talking about the Golden Gate Bridge?
No. This bridge that I'm about to cover.
Okay.
Actually.
Something like Full House opens with a shot of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember them bringing this up either because that episode was so much fun. I just had so much fun talking. We went from topic to topic.
I think it was like, because we talked about so much weird stuff the entire weekend, so it was one of those things that was brought up sometime during that. And then it's actually seen in La La Land. So there's a scene where they're walking one evening in the movie, and the bridge that they're walking across is this bridge. So, it's called the Colorado Street Bridge.
Okay, I've been waiting for the names. I'm like, you keep referring to it as this bridge.
It's called the Colorado Street Bridge. So before we get into the actual bridge, it's interesting to point out that the bridge does cross a seasonal creek called the Arroyo Seco, and it is dammed a few miles north at what is called Devil's Gate. And it's called that because of the rocks that are kind of sticking out there. It supposedly looks like some depiction of Satan, which I thought it was weird because I was looking at all these rocks and I'm like, I don't see it. I don't see it. But, I don't know. That's why it's named that. So there's that creepy fact. Some believe that this is one of the 7 portals to hell, apparently. There have been some rituals that took place there in the past. There have been some ancient burial sites that have actually been uncovered there over the decades. And the sound that the creek water makes against the walls of the canyon are said to sound a lot like laughter. So the Tongva people have attributed this sound to the sky coyote, which is a deity that is devoted to trickery and deception.
Okay.
So they believe that the Arroyo Seco actually belongs to this deity. So the Colorado Street Bridge isn't actually in Colorado, as someone might possibly assume based on the name. It's located in Pasadena, California, and obviously it's in La La Land, so it's somewhere in California, right? Because that whole movie's about La La Land. The construction of this bridge dates back to 1912, and it cost them a total of $191,000, which sounds like nothing, right?
But in 1912.
But in 1912. That's equivalent to about $5 million in 2020 money. So
2020 money.
So that's a lot of money, right? It spans about 1,500 feet, which is a little over 450 meters, and is about 150 feet tall. So that's about 45 meters tall. I kind of want to give you an understanding of how big this bridge is. It's a pretty big bridge. Its name comes from the street that runs across it. It's called Colorado Boulevard, but back then it was called Colorado Street. The bridge was opened on December 13th, 2013, which is interesting. 12, 13, 13. It's a interesting number. It kind of flows to me, I guess. But it's now designated a National Historic Civil Engineering Landmark by the ASCE or the American Society of Civil Engineers.
So you said it was open 2013. Do you mean 1913?
1913.
I was gonna say it got that
no,
landmark status
1913.
in 7-8 years. That's pretty good.
No, it opened in 1913. Okay, you know what? I was typing this. I was tired, but I didn't even make coffee. I told myself I was gonna make coffee. It doesn't matter. 1913, December 13th, 1913.
12, 13, 13.
12, 13, 13. There's no 20 there. Fuck that. Okay, so the American Society of Civil Engineers, like, this is a landmark now, that's it. And then it's also on the National Register of Historic Places as well. It has gone through a couple structural changes and improvements over time to maintain its structural integrity because it is older, right? During the 1989 closure and renovation, they also installed a suicide prevention rail to it. The moniker Suicide Bridge started getting used by locals after dozens of instances of people leaping to their deaths. It's really sad. And the fact that this is, you could type it in, right? You can type in Suicide Bridge Pasadena and this comes up. It's just the main thing that pops up because it's just a huge, huge deal. That being said, those aren't the only deaths that are attributed to this bridge. So as with many large construction projects throughout history, there are bound to be accidental deaths. A lot of sources like to say that there was one of these construction workers on this bridge that actually fell and landed in wet cement under the bridge. And they say that he didn't survive and that his fellow coworkers assumed that there wasn't any way to save him and that his body was left in the cement. And that supposedly his soul is one of those many souls that haunt the bridge.
That definitely feels like a wives' tale. I feel like you hear that about a lot of construction projects that have horrible things happen afterwards.
I feel like that did happen, though, at Hoover Dam.
I mean, at Hoover Dam, that's a completely different story.
Yeah.
So many people died at Hoover Dam.
Yeah, a lot of people died at Hoover Dam because they were rushing that shit. So though a lot of sources do have that be the case, there are some that say that that guy, Charles Johnson, actually survived. So 3 people fell off of some scaffolding. Like the scaffolding fell apart. 3 people fell off. Charles Johnson fell off. He lost his right arm and a leg, but he survived. And then another man named John Visco, who fell in that same accident, wasn't quite so lucky, fell straight into the creek bed and died. And then there's one other person who only got a couple bruises. He wasn't really seriously injured.
So he was the lucky one.
Yeah. But the person that they say got left in the cement survived. The first recorded suicide occurred November 16th, 1919. It was a 70-year-old named Smith Osgood. Supposedly, that day, he stopped a passerby as he walked the bridge, and he gave this passerby a note and told them, don't read the note, just take it to the police station. And the note read, quote, please telephone at once G.G. Wheat, Undertaker, Huntington Park, to send for my body and prepare for cremation. I am about to make the leap from your beautiful Colorado Street Bridge. Farewell, beautiful Pasadena. I loved you so well. End quote. So he planned it out. He's like, this is what I'm doing. BT Dubs, take care of this. I'm down there.
So this is another example of you think you're going to be a good person and deliver a message for someone, but if you read the note, you might actually be able to prevent them from taking their own life.
Right. So this event was followed by a number of others. Then, of course, came the Great Depression. So remember now, this bridge was built in 1913. Or it opened in 1913. It existed through the Great Depression, World War II.
No, you're right. World War I. I shook my head, but I was just like,
yeah, World War I,
wow,
World
that's
War
crazy.
II.
It was like a shake head of like a, God, that's nuts. I didn't mean to make you feel bad.
Yeah. So it's gone through a whole bunch of stuff. So I don't know if you folks learned about the American Great Depression, but it was a really rough time for Americans. So October 29th, 1929, known as Black Tuesday.
Or Tuesday across the pond.
Fuck, dude, stop. I don't think they like that, okay? So it was the 4th and final day of the worst stock market crash in the history of Wall Street. So this led to a domino effect of unfortunate events that it just kind of fucked up the U.S.'s economy, the United States economy. The market dropped by nearly 90%. That's a lot. So within 3 years, dropped nearly 90%, a drop that took the country almost 25 years to recover from. Wages for people were cut by about 42%, which means they got paid, like, people used to get paid like cents. They were getting paid even less than that. It's nuts. In 1933, about 25% of the workforce was unemployed. By 1930, about 1,300 banks were closed. The biggest bank failure in the U.S. was in 1931 when New York's Bank of the United States collapsed. The bank had more than $200 million worth of deposits in it.
Well, I mean, by the time it collapsed, no, it didn't.
Yeah. When you watch movies where people are scrambling to the banks trying to pull their money out, I don't know if you've ever seen like Grapes of Wrath, stuff like that. It's because these banks were placing these deposits within the stock market. Like they took these deposits, like your money, you put it into the bank, they take your money, they invest it. And so they invested all this money into the stock market and they lost everything because the stock market crashed so hard. So, a total of $2 million were withdrawn from that bank in one day because people were just like, give my money.
Give me my money right now.
So, and that's in 1930s money. That's a lot of freaking money. So in 1933, 4,000 banks failed. So it was just like bank after bank after bank. It was a real mess. $140 billion worth of bank deposits were lost that year due to these bank failures. That's a lot. It's nuts.
The Great Depression was not a good time. If you're not familiar with it, if you've only ever heard about it through like basic school teachings, and you'd like to know about one of like the worst times in U.S. history, feel free to look into it. It's absolutely fascinating. Also, the stuff that winds up pulling us out of it is very, very notable and relevant to this day, and some of the things that come out of that and the protections that wind up getting put in place to prevent it from happening again are things that I think people should know about.
This isn't a political podcast, so we're going to keep going into this thing. All these horrible things during that time led to a spike in deaths around this bridge. So between 1929 and 1933, it's thought that over 50 people took their lives by jumping off this bridge. The Great Depression definitely saw a rise in deaths all over the country because people just couldn't take it. Like, imagine if you lost every single dollar that you owned in this bank and you had nothing. You know what I mean? I'm sure there were a lot of people that were just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm done. Fuck this. I'm out.
I was literally an IRA administrator. And
during the recession?
During the Great Recession that hit us in 2007, 2008 time. And I cannot tell you how many conversations I had with elderly folks that came in to close their accounts that had been with the credit union for decades. That were just like, it's not going to happen to us. Like, if you guys gambled and got everything taken away, we're not losing our life savings. And like, we had additional training to talk people out of taking all of their money out of the banks. And like,
was it like people that lived through the Great Depression? So they're like, not again.
Most of the time from what I had to deal with, it was folks who had to live through the consequences of the Great Depression.
Okay.
So they remembered as kids how fucked things were.
Okay.
And they're just like, I'm going to take my money out. And like, you sit there and you talk to them about like, this is all the additional insurance the bank has taken out on your money, and your money is safe here. And here's all the things that still exist as far as protections go. But back in 2008, like 2007, 2008, when I was working at that credit union, I very distinctly remember everything shifting from approve every single loan that comes through, despite the fact that someone might go bankrupt trying to pay it, to immediately being like, decline everything and try and convince people not to take their money out to prevent another run on the banks. So it is absolutely crazy to think about you having to worry anything that you've earned and saved to possibly use later
is gone.
Could literally just evaporate. It's just a number that could all of a sudden be a zero.
That's why people started putting cash under their mattresses and stuff, right?
It's not a joke. That's legitimately what they did. Like, where are we going to hide it? Put it under the mattress. We sleep on the mattress. That's what we're going to do.
All right, so continue on. One of the most commonly told stories surrounding the bridge is that of a woman and her child. So on May 1st, 1937, a woman took her 3-year-old daughter to the bridge with the intention to end her life. Horribly, she made eye contact with a few pedestrians before she flung her daughter off the side of the bridge and then jumped to her death. Luckily, her child survived by landing in a tree. So the kid landed in a tree unharmed. The woman obviously did not survive. The girl credits her survival to angelic intervention. Because what are the odds, right, that you land in a tree down there?
And you're unharmed.
Yeah. Supposedly the woman pinned a note to her dress before she jumped, and it said, quote, I am Myrtle Ward of 4329 Myrtle Avenue, Los Angeles, end quote. So she
just wanted to be known. She wanted
I don't know about, right, but I don't think it was like, I want you to know who I am. I think it's like, tell, this is me, tell my family.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay,
yeah, that's exactly what I mean.
So according to Myrtle's mother-in-law, she'd been struggling ever since her daughter's difficult birth. Just before her death, her husband, who was a musician, had just gotten a new job. And to her, that kind of meant she needed to quit her job to take care of their daughter. And she thought that he deserved a better paying gig or something of that nature. And I wonder if postpartum depression had something to do with it, because postpartum depression is real and it doesn't just go away. And I hope that people out there that are experiencing this do try to get help, because there are resources out there for that. And I mean, maybe back then there really wasn't something like that.
I think there was so much stigma attached to any sort of like mental illness or mental issue that someone needed help with.
Right.
That like, one, there probably wouldn't have been resources available, especially at that time. And
1937, I'm sure people were still like, hysteria for women. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And two, you would have been looked at as just being crazy for mentioning it versus trying to actually say, I have this and getting help. And now is a different time. There's still stigma attached, don't get me wrong, but we're saying this on a podcast right now. Like, there are resources available. Please go and get help if you need to get help. And we support you 100% in that. And just about every single human being who listens to this podcast does as well.
So in order to deter suicides, an 8-foot barrier was installed. Unfortunately, it does not prevent those that are extremely determined to end their lives. On October 27th, 2015, a British-American model and reality TV star and musician named Sam Sarpong jumped from the bridge to their death. And that's really recently. There have been more deaths even more recently than that. In 2016, there was a temporary anti-suicide barrier that was installed. And these were like 10-foot chain link fences that were installed on the sidewalk that only blocked the seating alcoves. So it's like the bridge had little alcoves out that stuck out. And so they covered those to block people from jumping because they thought that that's where people usually went to jump. But despite the installation in 2017, there were 9 more reported. And then in 2018, there were 4 more. So after that instance, there was an instance when police had to go over there. They spent 13 hours talking someone down from jumping. And the fences were then extended to cover the entire span of the bridge, not just the alcoves. And then now the city plans to install more permanent solutions because people can still climb those fences and jump over. There are pictures of shoes that kind of litter along the other side of that fence where because people climb over to jump and their shoes get stuck in the fence. And so they lose their shoes, but you know what I mean? It's
just keep going.
Yeah. And so it's really depressing and it's really, really fucked up that this has to happen, that the city has to put up all these barriers to try and prevent this. And it's really scary. Like, is there something wrong with this bridge that people keep trying to go to this particular one?
I was going to say, because people come from other parts of the country and even the world to go to this bridge specifically to like coordinate their own ending. It
is estimated that more than 100 people have taken their lives from this bridge. They were victims of the times, like with the Great Depression, wars, things like that. Victims of their own personal demons. Maybe some are even drawn there by some trickery of the sky coyote or something. You know what I mean? It's very strange. It's really not known why this bridge has been the go-to location for so many, but it's really tragic that it is. And to me, it's a little bit scary because is there some sort of energy that surrounds that? You know what I mean?
I mean, I think it has this reputation as a people where a lot of people take their lives. So people that have those suicidal thoughts also think of places where people go to end their lives, which is really, really tragic and sad. And I understand why the city would put up gates and barriers to prevent something like that from happening, or at least to give you additional time to get there to prevent
There's
something
also
like that
signs
from
on both sides, like huge signs on both sides that say, like, if you're struggling or whatever, please call the suicide hotline. And it's just huge signs on either side of the bridge. So tales and local stories tell of spirits that wander the bridge itself as well as below. Some have even stated that they've heard unexplained cries coming from the canyon. Some hear the cries of babies, or there's reports that there's an occasional gruff voice of a man that says it's her fault, which is creepy. The air is also described as being quote unquote thick. I bet it's more like the air is just really thick and you get this weird feeling. And it's kind of an overbearing energy type thing.
Right. Smothering in a way.
Yeah. One report tells of a ghostly specter of a man that is often seen wandering the bridge in wire-rimmed glasses. Others claim to see a woman in a long flowing robe who stands on top of one of the parapets on the bridge, and she vanishes as she throws herself off. Like we always do when we cover topics like these, we hope that anybody that struggles or is struggling to reach out for help, or if you know somebody who may be struggling, reach out to them, call the suicide hotline, things like that, because that's really, really important. And we don't want to lose any of you spooky friends out there. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we're pretty big mental health advocates when it comes to this show. And Just a reminder, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 1-800-273-8255. It is available 24 hours a day. And there shouldn't be any stigma into calling this number. It's usually just people that are there to talk to you. They don't ask you anything about why you're calling aside from whatever you want to talk about, and they will talk to you. They are trained professionals, and it's something to be aware of because it exists. And I think it's really important for people to acknowledge that a lot of times people struggle, and there is no shame in calling a hotline just to talk to another human being if that's something that you feel like you absolutely need to do. And I do think that it's a step that if you get low, you should take, because it's not something that you should feel ashamed of. And it might just give you some sort of sense of relief or just connection with someone. So, again, I really think that that's something that we should repeat, because it's 1-800-273-8255. And locations like this do exist all over the world. You know, I cover the suicide forest in Japan, which is horribly, terribly tragic in just an awful way. And it's really hard to hear about, but it's also worth talking about because it is something that we don't want to have some sort of negative stigma attached to, where you have to go and hear about these things from someone who's not willing to tell you that this happens, but it's okay and it doesn't have to happen to you if it's something that you feel like you're dealing with. And I feel like a lot of times when you listen to shows that sort of talk about these things, it's to sensationalize or trivialize. And we don't do that. You know, we just want you to know, like, these are the stories behind these certain places when we cover specific topics like this. So we hope you folks understand that. And we hope you folks understand that we sincerely mean it when we say, like, we want every single one of you to stick around. It's not even a joke. We absolutely adore every single person who listens to our show. We still can't believe anyone listens to us and our crazy bullshit banter, and the fact that people find it entertaining. And the idea that any of you would ever go away just is unbearable to us. So if you can avoid doing that, absolutely do so, because there are two people sitting in chairs right now who want you to stick around. So good topic, Robin. I know it's a difficult one to cover, and I know you were definitely figuring out a good way to go through it and give the history of it and then the lore behind it as well while being respectful. And I think you did a really good job.
Thanks.
So good stuff. You were right, though. Very depressing.
Yeah.
So hopefully you folks are okay with hearing the end of a depressing episode, and you got your trigger warning. So if you skipped ahead, then you don't have to worry about it. But otherwise, I think that's just about everything we have for this episode. If you have a story you would like to share with us, it could be supernatural, spiritual, coincidental, true crime, extraterrestrial, paranormal in any way, please email storytime@scaryish.com or go to our website, scaryish.com. Click on contact us, fill out that form, it comes directly to us. Or you can hit us up on our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scaryish podcast. Twitter is @scaryish_pod. And Instagram is @scaryish podcast. We would love to hear from you. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/Scaryish podcast. Those are monthly donations. Tiers start at $1. At $1, you get ad-free episodes. And this month, this season, I'm mailing out Nightcrawler keychains. I'm so excited.
Fresno Nightcrawler.
Fresno
right?
Nightcrawler.
Not Jake Gyllenhaal.
Not Jake
from
Gyllenhaal.
The movie Nightcrawler.
And I'll be sending those out soon. And if you're not into the whole monthly donation thing, you can go to ko-fi.com/Scaryish podcast. Those are one-time donations. All your donations go to helping us upgrade our studio setup, kind of keep us going, kind of keep us making content for you guys, because we love what we do, and we really love sharing all this information and all these educational topics, historical topics, little knowledge nugs for you guys, and we really appreciate it.
Indeed. It makes things so much easier to have some of the costs associated with having a show paid for.
Yeah.
So thank you so much to everyone who donates, everyone who listens, rates, and reviews, shares it with friends. It really does mean the world to us, but I think that's just about everything we have for episode 186. So, Robin, go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.